In today's video, we're looking at the latest trade talk from around the NHL. We're looking at the Leafs, and has Brendan Shanahan made a promise to his core four guys that they will not be traded. We'll discuss the latest intel on that. Plus, could we see a trade involving the Buffalo Sabres and Winnipeg Jets around goalie Connor Hellebuyck? We also have some trade talk as well around the Philadelphia Flyers. Latest updates on Sens ownership, the Penguins GM job, the coaching job in Washington. We have a suspension and a signing in Buffalo. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As you heard in the intro here, we have a lot to cover here today, so let's dive right in and get started. First up, we have one of our first signings of the offseason, at least of a veteran player. We're going to probably see a few more of these here coming up in the next little while as we get closer to the end of the full season and into the full swing of the offseason here. But Buffalo has re-signed their captain, Kyle Okposo. Of course, the veteran's coming off a much larger contract with a 6 year deal of $6 million per year. Of course, he's did have trouble living up to expectations with that contract, but was still a good, influential player with the Sabres. Was a good leader for them. He signed a 1 year deal at $2.5 million, so he'll return on a short-term deal. Still be the C, still be a leader for them, and I think that's a pretty good signing. I really didn't have much doubt that he would return. I knew based on the season-ending comments from the team and the player, it sounded like they wanted to get something worked out. Almost a big pay cut, which, like I said, for them to work it out, he'd have to make far less than what he was making in a $6 million deal that just expired, but good on them to keep him around. I think that was a good decision. We had some incidents last night in a playoff game between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Dallas Stars, which, of course, was the first game of the series in Dallas, Game 3 overall. Things kind of got off to a very interesting start with Vegas scoring in the first minute or so of the game, and then Captain Jamie Benn took a major penalty, game misconduct, about a minute or so later. So 2 minutes into the game, they already have a goal, and Vegas now has a 5-minute power play. Just like that, Jamie Benn's penalty did also lead to a hearing today. There is a dedicated video on the channel if you want a little bit more of an in-depth opinion discussion analysis on that scenario, but he's been suspended for 2 playoff games for the cross-checking incident on Mark Stone, which was completely, in my opinion, avoidable, dumb, stupid, nothing. He had no reason to go that far with the joke. I understand he's frustrated, but it's early in the game. You're only down 1 goal, and you got to keep your emotions intact if you're going to have a chance to win. That, to me, is not good leadership at all. And then, of course, he didn't speak to the media last night, which I know a lot of fans were upset by. He did speak to the media this morning ahead of his hearing with player safety, and his comments were really, didn't really say much to me that was all that great. Like, he said that he regrets falling on Mark Stone and coming down with his stick as the landing point. I'm like, that's the best you can come up with? For one, Jamie Benn did not fall. He made himself go down. You could tell it was plain as day, and cross-checked him in the head and shoulder area. So anyways, he's out for 2 games. If the Dallas Stars do not win the next game, if they go out in the sweep to the Golden Knights, then that suspension will carry over to the 23-24 regular season, and Jamie Benn will have to sit out the opening game of Dallas next season. So just a bad spot. I have no problem with 2 games, but I find between the Bunting suspension early in the playoffs, which was 3, we saw Pietrangelo get 1 game. Just to me, very inconsistent in their decisions. Hard to wrap your head around what they're going to choose here, but I don't have any issues with it, because to me that was clearly intent to injure. So thankfully Mark Stone wasn't injured. I'm sure he's obviously it hurt, but nothing that caused him to miss time, which is good. Max Domi also got a fine last night, also for an incident against Vegas captain Mark Stone. He was fined $5,000 for a slashing situation. The Dallas Stars themselves, as a team, actually, their president and CEO, Brad Alberts, put out a statement through team social media earlier today, because things kind of got out of control. Or it wasn't, it wasn't a good night in Dallas. Not only did Vegas, obviously take it to the Stars early, Dallas, to me, looked tired. They lost their composure, and then the fans were getting out of control. At the end of the second period, they were littering the ice with a lot of debris, drinks and food, all kinds of stuff coming down. They ended up, there wasn't a lot of time left on the clock. I think it was under a minute to go. They sent the teams back to the dressing room and just tacked that on to the third. But yeah, they put out a statement apologizing to the league and to the Golden Knights for how their fans and spectators acted last night in littering the ice. So hopefully we don't see the repeats of that in Game 4. It's certainly not what you want to do. I understand when you get frustrated, you don't like certain calls or whatever, but you can't be doing that stuff. That's, not what you want to do. At the end of the day, it could hurt your team even more. The officials, if they want to, can impose delay of game penalties against the team for their fans acting in that regard. So not a good look for Dallas. It was just overall a terrible night for their first game in this round of playoff action against Vegas. Speaking of Dallas, another comment here. The GM of the Year award nominees and finalists have been announced, and Dallas GM Jim Nill is one of those 3 GMs on the ballot here. Don Sweeney, the Boston Bruins, and Bill Zito of the Florida Panthers also are the finalists here. I'm going to say probably that Bill Zito likely wins, given he was one half of the guys that orchestrated the Matthew Tkachuk trade, and look where they're at now in the playoffs because of it. So I wouldn't be surprised if he won. I know the Bruins and Sweeney, Boston had a historical regular season. It's unfortunate they lost so early in the playoffs, so it won't go down as being as great as it could have been, obviously. But I want to remind people as well, Don Sweeney also signed that Mitchell Miller contract, which was a major PR disaster early in the season, and he's still getting recognized here, which I'm not really so sure. And to me, honestly, I don't know that he really had that great of a year. The players on the ice certainly performed very, very well, but I don't know if he really went out of his way to do anything that substantial to justify getting into those conversations. So anyways, that's the 3 GMs of the year award nominees. I suspect Zito likely will be your winner. Longtime NHL coach and one of the winningest coaches in NHL history, and of course the guy who also recently made an appearance on Monday Night Raw. Of course, he's a huge wrestling fan. Bruce Boudreau might be having a reunion with one of the former teams he coached, and that was the Washington Capitals. It has been mentioned by the Capitals beat writer in The Athletic that he apparently is a name under consideration and a candidate for their open head coaching position. So far from a guarantee that he gets the job. There's lots of people that are being interviewed and considered for that role, but certainly Boudreau is a guy who knows the city, knows the organization well. Clearly the team has changed a fair bit since he's last been there, but there's still some of the core players, Ovechkin and Carlson and a few of those guys are still going to be around, so it's not like he doesn't know anybody, but he could be a potential good fit there. Certainly if they want to play more an offensive style, then Boudreau would certainly be a good candidate for that job for sure. It looks like the Penguins GM job is Kyle Dubas's if he wants it. No guarantee, of course, that he accepts, but all indications from NHL insiders is that basically, ever since he became available and they reached out to get permission, they put everything else on hold. And right now it looks like it's his job to lose, and it's only going to be lost if he decides he does not want it. Apparently he has been down to Pittsburgh to meet with the team. He's also met with Sidney Crosby. There was reports that he met with Crosby, I believe, at a practice facility or something like that. So if he's talking to Sidney Crosby, that certainly says a lot about where things are at. I don't know, like I said, if he's been formally offered anything. Nobody really knows that for sure. But considering that he was, he's been down there, he's met with them, they put everything else on hold, fair to say that it's totally up to him. I think right now that if he's gone that far with it, I'm going to say that I would get the feeling there's a good chance he takes it, but if his family and he decide that they want to wait, then it's possible they could decide to maybe keep an eye on things in Ottawa, maybe, because there has been a lot of reports that he'd have interest to go there. Should there be an opening once the ownership situation is resolved? And speaking of Sens ownership, latest updates from Ian Mendez of The Athletic indicates this seems to be a 3-group race. We thought maybe by now we'd have more of an indication on who the new owners are going to be and who's going to be given preferred status to close the sale. From the 4 groups that submitted bids, it seems like the Nico Sparks group is the one that's kind of lagging behind and probably has the least chance right now of pulling through to get that status. Every time you turn around, they're making announcements that they're adding more and more celebrities to their group. There's already quite a bit. I know they get a lot of attention when they add Snoop Dogg as being part of it. And then from there, they recently added Canadian Olympian Donovan Bailey, very famous Canadian comedian Russell Peters. And then they announced several members, or maybe even all of them, from the Dragon's Den show. Obviously, they're all, rich, wealthy entrepreneurs. But the thing is the word around that group and that bid was that they're still having difficulty raising all the money that they need to show to satisfy everybody to be successful here. So the fact that they're still raising capital and adding people to the group this late in the game says that that's likely not a good spot, not something that's going to happen. The other three groups include the Michael Andlauer group, the Kimmel Brothers group, which includes the pop sensation of the weekend, and then, of course, the Toronto billionaire Steve Apostolopoulos, who recently was bidding on the Washington Commanders NFL football team as well. Looks like he's losing out to Josh Harris on that one, but apparently he's worth around $6 billion from what I could find through Google. So he's still in the mix now. His hockey advisor is Nick Kiprio, of Sportsnet, which is, obviously we'll see. They even talked about it on his radio show with Justin Bourne today, just acknowledging the fact that he is an advisor for that group. Didn't really say too much. Obviously, I'm sure he signed enough NDAs that he wouldn't be able to. But those three groups are certainly in the mix, and no word yet on who the front runner is. We've had some people say they feel like the Michael Andlauer group is the front runner. I've heard some say the Kimmel Brothers group is the front runner. Haven't heard much about the Apostolopoulos group in that sense, but I know Mendez mentioned in an Athletic article that given what he knows about him and what he's learned about him, that he wouldn't be surprised if he was the one, because there was rumors of $1 billion bid, that it could have been that group actually that made that bid. We don't really know 100%, but it's likely going to be at least a few more days here before we find out who the NHL and the Board of Governors and everybody's likely going to accept. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully we know something sooner than later. On the trade rumor section of the video, we want to get into a few things here. One, on Darren Dreger on a recent Vancouver radio hit, we're talking about the Canucks and moves that they might be making. Of course, he said that Patrick Allvin was, obviously out there making calls, and he's trying to be active with the teams that are out of the playoffs or that missed the playoffs, trying to get a little bit of a jump on offseason maneuvering. Obviously, they want to make some changes. It sounds like the Canucks don't really want to do much in the way of buyouts or anything of that nature, but there's certainly some players that they'd like to move and get a jump start on things. He mentioned some other teams that they could possibly end up connecting with, and he did mention not necessarily having a clear, direct connection by, rumors that he's heard them talking or anything, but he said the Philadelphia Flyers, also a team that's very motivated to move bodies, and that they could end up connecting later on. He mentions guys like Kevin Hayes and Tony DeAngelo as guys that we know that the Flyers are looking to move, and didn't really see connection to the Canucks in that sense. But I mentioned that, what if they make Travis Sanheim available? Because there's been a lot of speculation that they're open to moving Sanheim. Maybe they get involved with the Flyers in discussions around him. We know the Canucks would certainly like to rebuild their blue line. We're probably looking at at least one or two forwards going out as well to kind of try to create some cap space. One of those likely being Connor Garland, maybe a Brock Besser. You don't know. I don't know if they're going to find a trade for Brock or if he's going to end up remaining with the club. But going into next season, Vancouver is the only NHL team actually that's already over the salary cap limit. So they have a terrible cap situation, and they need to find some flexibility. Like Rutherford and Allvin have gone on about the entire time they've been there. So we'll see. Could they connect with Philly? Could a guy like Sanheim maybe be on their radar? We'll have to wait and see as things kind of carry along here. There's also some speculation by some athletic writers that the Buffalo Sabres might be one of the teams in on Jets goalie Connor Hellebuyck, assuming Winnipeg makes him available. Of course, we know Winnipeg is likely going to be a team facing a lot of changes this offseason. We're likely going to see a move involving Pierre-Luc Dubois. We very well could see a move involving other top members of that team. We don't know if guys like Wheeler and Scheifele are going to move. And if there seems to be a lot of activity there, Connor Hellebuyck's made it perfectly clear he's not really interested in being a part of a rebuild or taking a big step back. And if he's not really pleased with the direction of the team, he's likely going to get dealt as well. He doesn't have much time left on his contract, but he could be an interesting addition for a team for the next 1 or 2 years before he hits free agency. And obviously the Sabres might be in that mix. Now, a lot of people speculated that maybe Buffalo will be content to run with Devin Levi. He had a real solid run at the end of the NHL regular season after he signed coming out of college. Clearly, he's a goalie of the future with that team. I don't think there's much doubt that way. As long as he keeps up what he showed there, then that's going to happen. However, that was a small sample size. And would him being the starting goaltender next year with a team that's prime and ready to make a jump for the playoffs, Is that too much to put on his shoulders? Would it make sense for them to try to acquire a veteran, solid netminder like Hellebuyck if one becomes available that they can get their hands on? Probably makes a lot of sense. It could mean that Devin Levi could be the backup or the 1A, 1B scenario where he doesn't have to play quite so much and could have a guy like Hellebuyck or something comparable to learn and be, as a mentor. That would be a terrific setup, in my opinion. Not somebody who you need to have in your organization for a long period of time, just to let Devin Levi get his feet wet for a year or two to kind of become the full-time starting guy down the road. I mean, obviously they have some young players there that they could certainly part with because they don't have room for them all to be Buffalo Sabres. Names like, Peyton Krebs or JJ Peterka, Noah Ostlund, any of those guys or some combination of that with some draft currency could be the type of offer that they might be willing to make to the Winnipeg Jets to acquire a goaltender like that. Of course, the problem in Winnipeg, though, is if they trade Hellebuyck, who's going to be their goalie? They're going to have to either have a deal with another team to bring a goalie back, or they're going to have to find a separate deal to bring in a goalie. I mean, a guy like Eric Comrie, who they're very familiar with in Winnipeg, could be made available, but is that going to be who they want? I'm not so sure that they're going to have confidence in him to come back and be the starting goaltender. Now, in Toronto, the latest updates on the big trades that we may or may not see out of that organization after a second-round playoff loss here to the upstart Florida Panthers. Chris Johnston of TSN, and of course his own podcast, the CJ Show, made mention that as far as he knows, after Brendan Shanahan moved on from Kyle Dubas, he personally informed the top 4 or 5 guys on the team. So you're looking at the core 4 forward, so Matthews, Tavares, Nylander, Marner, and I assume Morgan Riley's probably included in that conversation as well, that to inform them of the direction of the team, the changes that were coming. Chris Johnston says that those guys, to the best of his knowledge, left those conversations feeling like they were not going to be traded. Now, there's been a difference of opinion out there within Leafs media. There's some that are convinced that something has to change. They can't run it back with the same core group of players after 7 years in the playoffs with such a limited amount of success. Now, some people say, well, if the Florida Panthers go on to win the Stanley Cup, and that's the team that beat the Leafs out in round 2, should they really be that ashamed? Should they really make that many changes? Or do they run it back and tweak the peripheral stuff like they have been doing for the past couple of years? I mean, they make so much money tied up within the core guys that the supporting cast is constantly needing to change, and it happens every year. There's a lot, the third and fourth liners especially, and your depth D and all that is changing quite frequently. So obviously, that could be the case again this year. We'll have to wait and see, but would that really be smart? I know Craig Button on TSN, he said that would have been a massive mistake by Brendan Shanahan if he actually told those guys that they will not be traded, and I do agree with that. I know back even when Kyle Dubas was earlier in his tenure trying to get all these guys signed. Like, for example, the first contract that he had to get done was William Nylander. And that one really drug out. He signed at the 11th hour right before the cutoff that he wasn't going to be able to play and have to sit up the whole season. But he got the contract he wanted, essentially. And Dubas made the comment afterwards that as long as he was general manager, William Nylander would not be traded. And really, he doesn't have any trade protection in his contract. Why would you tell a player that? That to me is ridiculous, and it should not be done. I don't care who the player is and who the GM is. To me, that's irresponsible. You have to listen, in my opinion, at all times on all offers. You never know what's going to come your way, and then if you go back on it, now you're looking at a credibility issue. You don't want the player to lose trust in you. You really shouldn't be making those types of promises now. We don't know exactly, of course, word for word that was said between Shanahan and those players. But like I said, based on comments from Johnston saying that they're under the impression that they're all coming back, that to me is rather alarming. They should feel a little bit uneasy, in my opinion, after another playoff failure. Maybe they come back, maybe they don't. But at the end of the day, they need to explore making the team better to win the Stanley Cup. But that's their job as the management and leaders of that team. To me, the GM is not going to have full autonomy. They're going to have to report to Shanahan and the board. So I think Shanahan, if he really wants to, he could get involved with some of those early decisions and conversations to kind of have an idea where things are going to go. There was some talk as well through some of the NHL insiders that in the past, actually, which is kind of surprising to hear, But the Maple Leafs have never, ever entertained Matthews or Marner on the trade market. They've never even had conversations just to see. I mean, not to say that so, because GMs have conversations all the time. Doesn't mean they're going out there actively trying to trade people, when especially top players. But sometimes it's nice to see what other teams think of your players and what they might offer you, just to see, make you think, right? And there's word that they have on occasion kind of dabbled with William Nylander, saying, okay, if he was available, what could the market look like? Just to see. They never got anything deep or serious, but just to kind of do that and kind of, but they've never done that with Matthews and Marner. I don't think they trade Matthews and Matthews. I don't even think they really entertain it, unless they feel like he's not going to sign and they feel like they need to do something to risk losing him for nothing. That's the only way they ever trade him. Otherwise, if they're comfortable that he's going to sign, nothing happens. And him and Tavares stay. If they do make a change in the core four, like I said before, it's either Nylander or Marner that has to go. But they need to be careful. They really need to be careful. You can't make a trade just for the sake of making one, and I don't think they would. They're going to have to make a trade to make the team better, and finding that Kachuk kind of trade everybody keeps talking about, like we're seeing the benefit the Florida Panthers, it's not that easy. And if you happen to find the right deal, you pull the trigger. If not, you run it back and make changes as you see fit, and maybe you continue exploring for deals as the season goes along. But to me, if the rumors out of Chris Johnson that Shanahan told the core four they're not being traded, if that is indeed true, I think it's a huge mistake, and I don't think that's something he should be telling them. I think he needs to be making sure that they understand that, we still need to make this team better, and we don't know what we're going to do, but we'll keep you in touch, and we'll let you know as things move along. But I don't know that they really need to be making that many more promises to these guys after all the playoff winners that we've seen year after year after year. But let me know what you think. Would that be the right thing to run it back? Is it right for Shanahan to make those promises? Let me know your thoughts on that down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.